Right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the People and Dancefloors podcast. And today I am joined by somebody who I really admire. His name is Hadi Ahmadzadeh, and he is the founder of Ecodisco. Now, what is Ecodisco? I mean, that's like it's a really cool concept. First off, and when I saw the name on social media, I was like, "What is that? I need to find out more about this." So welcome, Hadi, and thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much. I'm glad to be here. Yeah, I mean, Ecodisco, what is it? Shall I fire away on the first question with that talk about?
Yeah, I mean, how did you come up with it? What was the what was the impetus behind it?
Yeah, I mean, Ecodisco started as basically a club night, as a concept party. Me and some friends, we used to, that same story of a bunch of friends in their teens throwing small club nights, getting really excited by it and enjoying it a lot. And we used to love kind of curating a space, and we spent hours hanging disco balls and arguing about which way the light should turn. And we just loved it so much. It was a real passion project for us, not a business. We never made any money. Another familiar story, but the one thing that just always really bugged me was that we couldn't align the kind of values of nightlife, the kind of positive cultural and social experiences, and the joy of people leaving our events at the end of a night. It didn't really match with the impact that the event had. Not necessarily, we weren't necessarily thinking environmentally. It was more the immediacy of just seeing like loads of bin bags and loads of chemicals come out, and all this kind of stuff where you were just thinking that doesn't really fit. It feels like what we just created maybe felt a bit fake because of what happened after it ended. And that's kind of where Ecodisco started, was in those moments at the end of events, even at the start of events, when we started to make them more sustainable. We used to like bring our own kind of compostable cups and then take them to the right place. And even that, like the whole process of having to just hide the plastic cups, replace them with our ones, was just like, what are we doing? This is, it didn't I don't know, just like it felt like a really big contradiction for me, and that kind of developed my passion for making nightlife more sustainable. And I'll say nightlife a lot probably, but what I basically mean is urban nightlife. So yeah, I mean music venues and nightclubs in urban areas, and also kind of outdoor spaces as well, but not big festivals. So obviously we work with big festivals, we do stuff like that, but our main focus is on kind of urban nightlife. And so it was in 2018 that we were throwing these parties, and they started to get quite big. The waste we were generating was getting bigger, and we were starting to see it as more of a potential kind of something that we take a bit more seriously and do a bit more regularly. So yeah, we tried lots of different things to try and alter the way that we run the nights, but there was just so much red tape. Like venues can't make these changes. They don't have, they can't increase costs on anything because margins are so tight already, because rent is increasing all the time. I mean, we're talking about before COVID as well. It's 10 times worse now. But my response was one of frustration, and basically decided to come up with my own kind of concept party to basically just say we can party in a more sustainable way. It can be just as fun, doesn't have to be taking away from anything that we all love, from all the escapism and the joy of nightlife that we all enjoy all the time. You don't have to take away from that. It's just about making changes that are relatively simple, but there's just so much red tape in the way, mainly cost. But we basically designed a load of reusable steel cups, and we got like fabric holders that go around the neck, and the cup would sit in the fabric holder, and people would use that cup through the night at the event. And we launched this in 2019 in June as an event, and we ended up on BBC News and Evening Standard, Progress 1000, like loads, just crazy media storm around it, because no one had really done it before. It was billed as London's first commercial club night to remove all single-use plastics. We use like canned water, and lots of people doing this kind of stuff now, but no one had really done it at this point. And it was just kind of a personal kind of mission to to do something big and make a big statement. I didn't really think about what would come afterwards, but through 2019 we did a few more of those events. We took a sound system to the global climate strikes that were organized by students and children, and then we ran a panel with Greenpeace, Friends of the Earth, got Paul Budd from Unity Agency came down, and yeah, we had a student representative from UCL as well, which was brilliant. We had a really good turnout for that. And we just there was just such a big appetite for sustainability and nightlife that we never really thought existed. But the way we approached it was so kind of, it's in the name, fusing eco and disco, like nightlife and sustainability. The two can sort of go together. They don't have to be kind of two things that crunch each other. And yeah, just understanding all the way that sustainability interlinks with everything. And when I say sustainability, I mean environmental sustainability and what we're doing, but there's obviously social, cultural, there's so many other aspects of nightlife that need to be more sustainable. We don't want to impact our future in a negative way. That's the basis of what we're talking about. But long story short, 2020 COVID-19 struck, and in some ways, I know I kind of hate the whole framing COVID-19 in a positive light or whatever, but for us it was for me it was kind of positive, because it meant it gave me time to reflect. And after a month or so, I'd set up Ecodisco as a consultancy company and basically evolved it from an event into a company that has the goal of basically making urban nightlife more sustainable on a wider scale, with scalable, affordable, measurable systems that remove single-use plastic cups, for example, is our first kind of big mission. But also footprinting, gathering data, and acting to reduce emissions across the industry as well. Again, in sort of more accessible and exciting way. And that was, almost exactly a year ago. It was June last year that I launched Ecodisco as a company. We're now a team of 10 people. We got funding from Innovate UK for our reusable cup rentals service, which we're piloting now, and it's about to kind of go commercial, which is really exciting. Yeah, that's kind of the story. We still do events. Like last weekend, we were working with Tia, the scooter company at Westfield. We had Horse Meat Disco playing Eleanor Starr and Heels and Souls and a bunch of other great DJs we just brought down. We still do live events, and we will be throwing our own events. But our main focus is now on providing systems for businesses, organizations in the events industry that don't cost the world, actually save them money, and also remove waste. So yeah.
There's actually quite a lot of thoughts that were coming to mind as you were speaking. So I'm going to try to kind of go backwards and unpack some of what you just said. Firstly, I love the fact that this started as a party, and so initially, there's a lot of discussion about how nightlife and politics never meet, because nightlife is about hedonism, and it's about people are not politically motivated, they're just there to have fun, and therefore there is no kind of political layer or dimension to nightlife and to what people do within it. And I just like the fact that actually the inspiration came from, I don't know, maybe you were an environmentalist before, or you had an environmental consciousness before, I'm sure you did, but it's just the witnessing and the experiencing of nightlife can, have political and principled kind of change, or can stimulate that kind of change.
100%. We've seen it throughout history in lots of different, topics. The problem is, the difference, between, I don't know, queer culture or, I don't know, just human rights in general, and the impact that the nightlife culture has had on various different aspects of society. You never really put sustainability or plastic or whatever in that conversation, because there is a kind of rhetoric around sustainability, again, environmental sustainability, that is inaccessible, is very white, very upper to middle to upper class. It is problematic. And I worked for a climate change charity broadly put, for a year, and really enjoyed it, and it was, felt very like I learned a lot. But in that world, this is whilst working on Ecodisco, in that world, it was just a totally different way that people communicated, and the way that we talked about the way that people talked about the problems was sort of entirely inaccessible and didn't really make sense. And as I say, from where we've come from, throwing the events and everything, it wasn't a sort of, I mean, don't get me wrong, I have very close connection to nature. I'm, maybe an environmentalist at heart, however you want to put it, but it wasn't like a overriding sort of guilt, or I wasn't thinking about oceans or trees or anything. It was just seeing it, on a practical sense. If you think about, what's good design and what's bad design, and kind of, I've got a bit of perfectionism about me, and I just didn't like the way that the night ended. I just felt it was so silly, like, and the whole, a big part of what we're doing with Ecodisco is about design, and designing systems that make sense, that don't produce waste. I mean, it's not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to be extremely, I don't know, people use political, left, right, and center, but you don't have to be a particularly political person or an activist or anything like that to see something that's just sort of needs to change, like needs to progress. And so, we see ourselves as nightlife first, and then sustainability, because that's how we've kind of grown. And innovation is what connects the two. And anyone who says, that nightlife and politics can't connect, are just avoiding a conversation because they're scared it might burst their, escapism bubble, but actually it strengthens it. And, obviously these conversations need to be had.
Yeah, I mean, there is a sense that design can be a bridge, political bridge, because obviously you have the more kind of left-wing hippie Puritan types who are all about changing individual behavior in order to make life more sustainable and for the longevity of the planet. And then you have maybe people who are more about innovation and technology. But I also think that there are people who don't necessarily engage or think about these things in the context of nightlife. So it's about, and indeed, if, like you said, for venues, there are no incentives for them to do things differently. There is no money from the government that they can, access if they, engage in more sustainable practices. So, all considering, it does kind of rely on projects like yours to instill a change in the way that we design and do things.
I almost feel guilty. that because it's almost the argument that you don't want to support. It's that, the capitalist argument of, innovation will succeed, or, government intervention is not needed, or, we don't support that rhetoric, but it's the reality that we're living in at the moment. And we could, what you were just saying is interesting. I think the XR activists are just as much needed as the right-wing conservationists. Like, they all in the same bubble, pushing towards the same thing. It's a shame everyone's not unified, but that's life. And I think there's lots to say about, I guess, capitalism, design, the way Ecodisco works. And I think we are definitely realists in this context of, we believe that sustainability, removing waste, like changing the way that we interact with products and materials, it has to be a profitable industry. It can't just be loads of non-profits doing this, because you get a kind of like crazy loop of competition around funding, and it all just gets a bit toxic. And actually directing capitalism in a new kind of direction is what we talk about a lot of. Rather than trying to overthrow the system and say it's flawed, everything's, I don't know if I'm about to swear, I was about to, but everything's messed up. Rather than saying that, you just say, okay, this is the context we're in. What can we do best within the context we're in? And how can we make it, economically sustainable? And empathy is a massive part of it, because you can't go to a venue and say, guys, you just need to do the right thing, do it now, because they'll turn around and be like, what, they'll hate you if you say that. Obviously they want to do the right thing. Everyone wants to do the right thing. There's very few people who maybe are like skeptical of how serious the climate crisis is, whatever, they'd still want to remove waste. Like, no one is actively producing loads and loads of waste because they want to. You have to have empathy towards people's situation. Go to the venue and say, you spend lots of money on this, we're going to help you spend less money on that, and also that's going to help you do the right thing. And then suddenly it just, if you go in there with the empathy of, we're nightlife, we understand nightlife, we understand the economics of it, we understand the challenges faced by everyone in the industry. It's really hard to find systems that obviously can tailor to such a difficult industry, but it is doable, and it often relies on a bit of give from the crowds. Our reusable cup system, it basically depends on every customer at an event paying £1 extra for their night out, and that allows us, we call it a green fee. Anyone, some venues choose to call it that, some say a green tax, some don't say anything at all and just include the £1 in the ticket price. Whatever it is, it just relies on everyone who comes through the door paying £1 extra, and then we deliver reusable cups that are needed for the event or for 3 events in a row, and then after those events we'll collect them and re-deliver clean ones, and that's our kind of like loop. And we just deliver, collect, wash off site, and that £1 just covers the cost of that system, rather than the venue paying whatever it is, £6,000. It's a customer paying £1, and
it's like a shared, it's basically a shared responsibility effectively, and that's and that makes it viable. It's funny that, like, as you were talking, I was thinking about this kind of concept that I've been obsessing over for the past couple of months, the idea of responsible pleasures. So, how to, I guess, to put two things together that usually are not, they don't occupy the same space, like responsibility and pleasure, and think through ways in which we can have both, basically. And I think Ecodisco is a perfect example of that. And I guess it ties into the notion that with other kind of investments lacking, particularly with leadership from the government lacking, I think that using capitalism is what I agree with you, is the only thing that we have left to do. It's not like we can just continue to, I don't know, beat ourselves up or try to compete for the meager funding that already exists amongst NGOs that operate in this domain, and indeed others, because it's very much the same for others. I guess the next question, or the next thing that I'm going to ask you about, is the role of drugs in the context of nightlife, and that's because that's been a massive part of this project and it's a big interest of mine. So yeah, because there's been a lot of discussion, well, maybe not a lot of discussion, maybe not enough discussion about the relationship between drug used in the context of nightlife and then waste. So there's been at the beginnings of discussions, but it's nothing really, nothing really kind of beyond that. So yeah, how do you feel about the role of drugs in the context of nightlife?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the most complex questions to tackle, and I think it's similar to what we're doing on our end as well. Is a question that is often kind of ignored, or people skirt the question, and often you'll see the kind of positive sides of these kinds of topics outweigh the negatives, because the positives are obviously great, and drugs have been a part of nightlife for so long, and almost like inseparable now, which is an interesting. It's so complex, for something that is illegal. And I'm talking about legal drugs. I know you sort of bulk alcohol in with the same term, which obviously makes a lot of sense. But there's the difference between the kind of legal drugs and illegal drugs. I mean, one, there's a lot more on the legal side. There's a lot more conversation. There's a lot more kind of to and fro, even amongst friends, never mind like within the industry or within organizations. Whereas when things are illegal, it's almost impossible to kind of get your head around how drugs should interact with a night out, or with people, or with an event, and how to manage, and how to make sure everyone's safe. And for me, like on just like a personal level, I've found it kind of nightmare, the party drug scene recently. I think it's been quite detrimental towards the kind of sterilization of nightlife that we've experienced. I think often, I mean, and when I talk about this, I mean mainly kind of student nightlife and young people kind of entering into the world of partying and you know, substances and everything else. I think often the night becomes more about the drugs and less about the music and less about the, you know, I don't know, the experience itself. And for me, a night out, to be fair, I'm talking as me from a year ago because I haven't been on a night out for so long, but for me, a night out is all about, you know, the escapism, the joy, the kind of thrill of a night out that we experience. You don't require drugs to experience that. And I think something that's happening recently is it's becoming a kind of, one is dependent on the other. And I think that's, you know, slightly problematic. It's almost like people are forgetting how to use drugs properly. They're there to enhance an already brilliant experience rather than to create your experience. And, you know, again, this is all just this is not the opinion of Ecodisco or anyone else. This is just me kind of, you know, enjoying an interesting topic. But I think it's brilliant to what you guys are doing, because this conversation isn't had enough. And I think everyone has lots of different opinions on different types of drugs and how they interact with nightlife, and I think it's really important that everyone starts talking a bit more honestly and openly, and I think it will strengthen the experience for everyone and improve, you know, the industry definitely.
I was just thinking, you know, in terms of the relationship between nightlife and consumption. Obviously drugs, including alcohol, are a massive part of that. So, and often, you know, that kind of idea of hyperconsumption or overconsumption is often motivated by being in altered states where one loses a lot of the inhibition. And so, you know, I don't know, I'll give you an example. You know, having a house party where people are drunk or drinking or taking drugs, and then sort of like people leaving the house and seeing the house completely, you know, littered with stuff everywhere, glasses, you know, cigarette butts, whatever, you know, just because people sort of lose the sense of what they're, you know, the consequences of what they're doing because they want to be in the moment. So there is a real tension there, which I think, you know, I mean, I see it, but I think obviously in terms of what Ecodisco is trying to do, you know, there's also about, you know, how do you instill that sense of like responsibility that does require a little bit of behavior change, because even if you're using a reusable cup, you do have to remember to, like, you know, carry it with you and, like, you know, then fill it up again. And then, you know, that sort of requires a shift in behavior compared to single use, where it's just like throw away and start again and then just make more waste.
Well, that's, yeah, I mean, that's a brilliant kind of analogy. And I think that's what we're trying to do, you know, through our work, is we understand that whether it's alcohol, whether it's cocaine or MDMA, whatever it is, we know that everyone goes out to lose their inhibitions and to feel like they don't have to think about any of the serious stuff in their life and they can fully leave it all behind. I do the same. I'm not thinking about sustainability when I'm on the dance floor. It's not something I want to think about. Like, it's all about, you know, it's all about finding that space of kind of joy and excitement and you know, new experiences, meeting new people. And it's not about, you know, remembering to do this or that or the other. And that's why, you know, a lot of our work is all around kind of normalizing certain behaviors. Firstly, massively reducing the amount that we expect from a consumer. So our reusable cup system, for example, we don't require people to hold on to the cup. Right? Once they paid their £1 in the ticket price, you then basically get an unlimited amount of cups through the night. You trade in your dirty one for a clean one, you drop your dirty one in a cup bin that would be around the venue. Like, there's lots of you know, there's loads that you can do as an organization like ours to make it as easy as possible when your mind is in the right place, when you're thinking about the experience and retaining the experience for customers rather than, you know, I don't know, thinking about other stuff. Don't know what else you'd be thinking about. But so yeah, I mean, you know, our system is specific to reusable cups. Our system is basically the same as single use. Like, you use a cup once, and then once it's dirty, we wouldn't encourage any to refill it, especially at the moment due to potential for cross contamination. But the cup just goes into a crate that's for the dirties rather than going in a bin, and that's it really. So
yeah, that's actually a really good system because it doesn't it doesn't require a massive behavioral shift from what is happening currently, and it also obviously makes it COVID safe. I guess I really like the fact that when you spoke about COVID in a positive way, like giving us a chance to reflect and sort of plan ahead about how to, yeah, it's like this kind of big opportunity to pause and then start differently. And that's certainly what I'm hoping I'm hoping that nightlife will, when it's reborn, it will kind of take on slightly different features, let's say, than the ones that we left behind back in, March 2020 or whenever it was.
I think there was kind of a big idealistic expectation of, oh, well, after this year, obviously things will be different. But I feel like people just didn't realize the amount of work that you have to put in through that year to actually make change happen. And I think, lots of people I talk to now are like, oh, I'm so disappointed by, we're just going back to how we were doing before, booking DJs in the same way and everyone using single-use cups again and all this stuff. And I was like, well, yeah, that's what, our industry, like, I mean, specific to nightlife, our industry does not have the capacity to just like go, oh, I feel like changing. I'm gonna change out the way we do things. People need to start really, I don't know, putting, like, it takes a long time to have even a small shift in the way an organization or an industry runs, and it's entirely possible. Like, if there's anything that I've learned through the last year, whilst there's been no industry and we've been working on this, is it's so possible to just like push things through. If you obviously we were very lucky to win some funding that helps, but it's been inspiring to think the things that you would usually be cynical about and be like, oh, it's never gonna, I'm a bit of a cynic. I'm like, oh, things are going to be the same after COVID. I get a bit cynical about it, but actually this year I've been kind of inspired by not just the work we've been doing at Ecodisco, but all the people around us who are doing similar stuff, and the amount of things that have been achieved, and actually being able to see them happen and see things that you used to say would be impossible now becoming a reality. It's inspiring, but we need more and more of it.
Yeah, I agree. I feel the same way about this year, although I've been sort of witnessing on social media discussions by people who were hoping for the way in which the kind of really hierarchical nature of the industry is toxic for people that exist at the bottom, right? So whether it's DJ or like people that do like sound work in clubs, and I think even there, I'm obviously I'm really sympathetic to the calls from people to say, let's shift the culture towards a more kind of inclusive, maybe more horizontal kind of way of doing things. But at the same time, I also know that for clubs and promoters to make the money, they need to book the big names, and then it's just this.
It's a vicious circle. Yeah. It used to be stuck in that. Exclusivity deals are the biggest problem.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, this is where capitalism gets, difficult and not so good. But let's not get into that right now, because I could just literally go on forever. The last question that I've got for you, and I'm going to try to combine the two questions that I had, is I want to hear about your utopian vision for the future of nightlife, but I also want for you to focus on whether harm reduction has a place in it, and if so, what that would be. Because I always ask this question about harm reduction, and it means different things, different people in different contexts, but I like it, so I'll keep it.
Yeah, I mean, again, yeah. I mean, utopian vision for the future of nightlife. I mean, harm reduction definitely plays a big part in it. I don't know, again, like when you're trying to solve problems or change certain things, you end up sounding a bit negative about everything. I mean, the nightlife scene, in my opinion, is fantastic. It's one of the last remaining kind of places in society where we can do ridiculous things that you wouldn't expect people to be allowed to do, and generally we're not allowed to do them. But we have this kind of space where we can go a bit wild, and it's not sterile. And obviously it's changing a lot, and it's saying earlier about things changing with the way people go out now, and the role that drugs play in that. But if you look at it holistically, it's still, even though it's potentially becoming worse, it's still so much better than so many other things in society. So I'd say that first is it's already an amazing space and there's a reason I work in the industry. But there's lots, obviously, for lots and lots of room for improvement. And what you were speaking about earlier about, you know, the responsibility and the losing your inhibitions, and how do those two things interact, and can people be responsible whilst also being totally off their head, like enjoying themselves to the absolute maximum capacity. And for me, you definitely 100% can. And I think there's a big excuse out there, and it's almost like there's this like fragile bubble, which is the nightlife scene and parties and going out. And obviously it's been under more threat than it ever has been over the past year and a half, but it's constantly under threat, and people who within the industry, rightly so, protect it and try and keep everything that's in that bubble safe. But unfortunately, there's lots of things that are in that bubble that need to be talked about and that need to be opened up. And I think the only way you strengthen it, or even just remove the bubble and normalize some of the things that we experience in the industry. That, I mean, whether it, like, I mean, you're likely to be more at risk when you lose your inhibitions and when you're on a night out, and whether it be from predatory behavior, physical harm, alcohol, drug-induced illness, mental health issues, that they're all problems that nightlife is faced with, and they're all entirely connected to the conversations around sustainability as well. And I mean, I think for me, I guess harm reduction is about facilitating conversations about these topics, and to acknowledge that they exist, which lots of people don't, and there's often an angry response on any of those and any of the above. People don't like to have their bubble of wonderful, positive, happy, you know, everyone welcome nightlife. They just, everyone pushes every festival, every venue, everything says everyone welcome, we're so happy, we're so lovely, you know. We know you are, we know it's lovely, but you're not accessible. Like, everyone's not welcome. There's lots of bad things that happen. And I think people need to acknowledge that issue exists and then actively address them. And I mean, there's ways of normalizing behavior so that when you're off your nut, it's just normal to not go and pinch a girl's bum for no reason, like, and various other horrible things that happen on dance floors across the country. And I just feel like it's a real cop out for people to say, oh yeah, but we can't always be snowflakes or whatever, or thinking about other people's feelings all the time. Like, how would I ever have any fun? I think it's just the biggest cop out ever. And you know, the identity and the quality of nightlife, it can only be strengthened by more conversation and more active engagement in those problems. People just got to be a bit more brave, I think. And you know, it's the same on our end with environmental sustainability. It helps a lot when a normal person talks about this stuff and frames it, rather than like some external corporate consultant or some NGO who, you know, take it really seriously. Like, you have to bring levity to the situation. Lots of what we do is about humor. There's ways to make the conversation more accessible. Can obviously be quite traumatic for some people. It's not as if everyone is avoiding it for bad reasons. I mean, there's a long way to go, but I think we want to play a role in you know, beyond kind of cups and emissions. Obviously, you know, we've got a team of people who all feel very passionate about you know, providing safe spaces for these conversations. So yeah.
Amazing. Preach to all that. I'm just like, yes. But yeah, that's great. And I very much share your vision. And I think that, you know, the more conversations we can have, and the more, you know, we can go beyond our own sort of little bubbles to kind of all engage in conversations and see where the overlaps are. I think that already goes some way. So thank you for joining me today. I really enjoyed this. And yes, and you've got a website. Please go and visit the Ecodisco website. And we're looking forward to seeing more of what you do in the future of urban nightlife.
Brilliant. Thanks so much,
Hadi. Thank you. Take care.